Hello everyone, welcome to Campus TV. This is Simran Sharma reporting from Jyotirmas College, and today we have with us Ms. Manisha Pandey, who is a highly acclaimed journalist, host, and who is also an executive editor at News Laundry. Welcome to the 10th edition of MediaCon 2024, ma'am.
Thank you, Simran.
Ma'am, there are various news outlets and media platforms who cover sensitive issues like sexual harassment, rape, abuse, the recent one being the RG Kar Kolkata rape case. So, what do you think is the key difference between the covering of such issues in terms of digital media and print media?
So I think I will make the distinction between legacy media, which are like old brands, television news and newspapers, and digital media. And within that, I'll make the distinction that I think newspapers usually cover issues like this fairly sensitively. It's television news where there's a lot of sensationalism whenever there's a crime against a woman. So, what was she doing? What was she wearing? Who was she with? In this case, there was a lot of misinformation about certain amount of semen that was found in her body, which was completely incorrect. What was mentioned was actually the weight of the uterus and not the amount of semen. But there was a lot of misinformation spread in this case that, X amount of semen was found, so it was a gang rape. So there was a lot of crass sensationalizing about how many people, how did they do it, want to get into details that, are not nearly necessary in such a case. So you find that a lot in television, I feel. Newspapers, I think, still report fairly less sensationalized way. And I think with digital media, the big difference is, and especially I would say independent news organizations like News Laundry, we are very clear about the fact that we don't want to use a crime against a woman to sensationalize or to give it a tone which titillates an issue. I think the issue is safety for women at the workplace. Here, in this case, the woman was in her workplace, she worked in the hospital, and yet she was unsafe there. So it's important to raise issues that that you can talk about on the back of a crime. So safety for women in the workplace, what are the mechanisms, what are the infrastructure for a doctor or a nurse in a hospital to feel safe when she's working after hours. Also cases of sexual harassment within organizations and policing. I think the big question in this case was also policing. So those are the issues that we like to focus on, not just the incident, how it happened, but also the broader issues that you can talk about using a crime against a woman.
Talking about that, how do you think women are represented in the space of journalism?
I think things have changed a lot. You have now women editors in major newsrooms. You have a lot of journalists who are women. They're covering politics, they're covering defense, they're covering home affairs, yes, me being one. So there is a lot of, now I think in the newsrooms you see a lot of presence of women. But I think the one problem that we still have to face is women's issues. Like, why do we only talk about women's issues when a crime happens? We don't have to talk about safety always after a rape. We can talk about safety issues, policing, street lights, mechanisms to protect women in the workplace, even when there's no crime, so that we make sure crimes don't happen. So I think all year round coverage on women's issues is very important. All year round focus on safety for women is very important, rather than just talk about something when a bad crime has happened.
Talking about that, in your keynote address, you spoke about the importance of fact-checking and objective journalism. There have been instances where Asian News International, they have been taking down content from independent media outlets like News Laundry, Being Human, Wikipedia itself.
Yeah.
So, where do you think this is heading towards?
That's a very interesting case, and I'm very happy that you guys are following these cases so keenly. So, with the case against Being Human, for example, there's no factual inaccuracy in what he's doing, but the case was that he's doing copyright infringement, that he's taking our content and he's passing it off as his, which is not true, I think, because he was using it to memify it, which is a different kind of a thing to do than just taking content and saying that it's mine. So increasingly you're going to have a lot of, when big media organizations are criticized, including ANI or India Today or Times Now, when they're criticized and when they see that a lot of people now no longer trust them because sometimes the news they put out may not be factually correct, or because people may feel that they have a certain leaning, when they feel that there's a trust deficit, they're going to attack the people who question them. So I think a lot of these cases have to do with the fact that, they are questioning our credibility. Like with Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page is not Wikipedia, editing themselves or somebody sitting in a Wikipedia headquarters and editing it. It's crowdsourced. So a lot of it is people citing articles, relevant news, relevant information to say what they're saying about ANI. And I think that's perfectly okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with how the Wikipedia model works, and in fact, it's very robust editing kind of platforms that we have, which is open to everyone. But I feel like the moment big media organizations feel like there's criticism coming their way, they will try and throw cases at you, or they'll try and silence you. So that's how I see it.
Now, do you think objective journalism is even real? Or
No, like I said, like even in my keynote address, I was saying that all of us journalists have biases. We are not superhumans, we are not gods. We all have our own life experiences, we all have our own politics, we all vote, for example. So we all have our leanings. No one is completely free of bias, but the important thing is that we are fair with what we're dealing. We are transparent about our biases. If I have a certain conflict of interest, I need to be very transparent with my audience that this is my conflict of interest. So completely unbiased people are not, possible to have such people in news. But I think what is possible is to make sure that news is fair, news is transparent, and news gives space to all aspects of a story.
given the government's online news policy, the broadcasting bill, that has not been implemented
Yeah.
yet, but we have seen a few instances of it happening in UP, Uttar Pradesh, where they offer 8 lakhs to people if they speak
Yeah.
positive about the government, and if in case you speak ill of the government, they straight away send you to jail.
So one important distinction is that a lot of political parties are doing it. It's not governments really. So like even Rajasthan government, Punjab government, Uttar Pradesh government, they all have. It's not the government; it's the parties usually. In many cases, it's the parties. Sometimes it's the government also. The idea is that you talk about our scheme, or you talk about something good we're doing, and we'll pay you, so that influencers can influence other people into getting them to vote for that party. It's very tricky because I feel like if you're getting paid to put something out, nothing wrong with that, but I think there should be a disclaimer, right? Because it's essentially an advertisement then. So there should be a disclaimer that this content was paid for by the UP government or paid for by Rajasthan government, so that as a viewer I know, okay, there's a conflict. The person has been paid, so I'll listen to the person, but I'll make my own judgment because it's an advertisement at the end of the day. So I think it's fine that it's happening, and I think it's inevitable also. But it's important to have disclaimers in such a scenario.
Now, how do you think News Laundry's investigative articles, the one being the RTI investigations, where politicians use PSUs, public sector undertakings, to generate revenues as vending machines? So, how do you think it has impacted the public discourse and the government response as well?
So this is an article that I had done with another colleague of mine, Sandeep Pai, and we had won an award for this. It was an RTI investigation. The impact of it is actually that I think people need to understand that public sector companies, when they put out ads or when governments put out ads, it's taxpayers' money. It's my money, it's your money. Everyone pays taxes in India, and when governments put out advertisements, they're using our money to put it out. And so when our money is involved, they have to put it out in a way that benefits us. So use that money to inform us about a new scheme, that's perfectly okay. Use it to tell us about what new developments may be happening in our state. But don't use it to promote your own family or your friends and give it to an agency that may be linked to you. And I think the important impact that had was to start a discourse, start a conversation about why public money, especially for advertising by PSUs, has to be used very carefully and with responsibility.
And there was another investigation that revealed how sedition law, how government is misusing sedition law to silence the dissent, and how journalists have been relieved from that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
So this was a piece, I think you're talking about how ED, CBI and all these. So this was a story that my colleague Tanishka had done, and again a report that we had wanted to do in News Laundry was, we know that a lot of cases are filed against journalists. We keep hearing that FIR filed against this journalist house raided. So what we wanted to do was have a collection of all these stories to understand how big the problem is. Because sometimes you have sporadic incidents and you forget about them. But if you have in one place that, okay, X number of journalists faced income tax notices, or X number of journalists faced CBI inquiry, or X number of journalists had FIRs filed on them, then we get a big picture of the problems that journalists are facing. So our main aim with that story was to make sure that we know the scale of the problem and we don't just look at it as one incident, two incidents, three incidents.
And can you walk us through the process of X investigative story? How do you
So recently we won a recognition for a story that we had done on electoral bonds. This was a collaboration of three newsrooms, News Laundry, Scroll and Newsminute. The process is really, typically in a newsroom you have editors and you have reporters and you have the desk which will edit a story. So reporters file a story, it goes to a desk will edit it, and then editors on top will typically clear it, look for everything. So when you have an investigative story, it starts with an idea which an editor can have often, or sometimes even reporters can have it. And we find that, okay, this is a story that will take maybe 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And this is a story that needs a lot of facts, research, digging, information. Once you decide on a story, then you go about planning what are the elements you need in a story. So you typically tell the reporter that, okay, these are the documents you need to go through. This is the pattern that we need to look at, and tell us what you find. And always one thing very important about investigation is you always go with an open mind. You never decide that this is my story. You go with an idea of a story, but you go with a very open mind that something completely different can come out, emerge. So it's very important to be curious, it's very important to be thorough, and it's very important to look at all facts available to you. Usually investigations take time, it can be 3 months, sometimes it can be 6 months, so there's always a lot of back and forth. The reporter will find something and say, hey, I found something very different. Editor will sit on it and say, okay, you found this, but why don't you find something more, linking this to something else? And there's a lot of back and forth. Finally, when the reporter files the story, it goes through the desk, where a lot of questions will be asked. Sometimes stories can be rewritten again completely. And that's how you ensure objectivity also, right? Like multiple people are seeing it, multiple people are giving it a look, so it can't be biased because there are too many people involved in a collective process. So it goes through multiple filters. So when it's with the desk, sometimes it can completely change shape. Very important part of investigative reporting is that when you are writing about someone or some people or an organization or a political party, you have to give them a lot of time to respond to whatever you are saying, charges that you may be making. So we will give them 72 hours, sometimes 4 days, sometimes even a week, depending on how serious the story is, to respond. You send long questionnaires that this is what we found, what would you like to say about it, what is your comment. So we really ensure that every story that we do, whoever we are talking about gets fair amount of chance to respond to what we are saying. And yeah, that's broadly how it works. And then finally editors will take a look at it and see if all is well with the story. Then you do another round of fact checking on everything that you have. So it's long, it's painstaking, but it's very rewarding.
Even yesterday you tweeted about it.
Yes.
Same, you are very active on Twitter.
Yes.
So does that make any difference to your journalism, do you think?
Being active on Twitter?
Being active on Twitter about your
Social
work?
media.
Yeah.
So I'm very careful that I use Twitter very carefully. It's mostly to talk about my work. I don't try and do something viral every other day, or I try and restrict my time also. I spend 2 hours a day, that's it. I'm not going to spend more than 2 hours because, like I said in my keynote also, it's important to use social media to put your work out. It's important to use it smartly, but you shouldn't get addicted to it or consumed by it that you're not really working and all you're doing is just tweeting. So we are very careful about not becoming people who are just constantly saying things, doing things, but not actually doing anything in real life.
Can you share any personal experience or anecdotes that has shaped your journalism?
Many stories have shaped
Something that is very personal to you.
something very personal to me. I mean, I think every day, for me as a journalist, every day is one thing very great about being a journalist. This is that you learn every day with every story. So it's a very dynamic, interesting field. Every day you meet new people, every day you meet interesting stories. Every day you come across things that, can interest you, can make you curious. And there's a lot of thinking all the time. So you're always on your feet. So I think I'm learning every day, but I think a very recent example is maybe I was in Kashmir for elections and I have done one story on journalists in Kashmir and the difficulties they are facing there. So it was very interesting to talk to them, understand their idea of journalism, understand how difficult it is to sometimes report from an area which is very contested, it's very polarized, it can involve a lot of different agencies acting as different actors. So that was, I think, to me very interesting to see how journalists are trying to navigate a space which can be very contentious for them, and how brave sometimes journalists are in India. I mean, we keep talking about press freedom and all that, but I think so many journalists are doing such an amazing job of doing day-to-day work, day-to-day bringing you information that matters to you, while sometimes being questioned by the police or while being sometimes questioned by all different aspects of the governance there, and how strong and how committed you can remain to your profession despite having an adverse scrutiny on you.
Yeah, when you are there, you experience a lot of things.
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, there are many aspiring journalists who want wants to pursue a career in this field, who wants to make a career out of journalism, are there any insights or key takeaways that you want them to take away from this interview?
So, whoever wants to be a journalist, I think one thing very important is to really love news. I think if you're someone who is very interested in current affairs, what's happening around you in the world, if you're a curious mind, you'll really enjoy this profession because, like I said, every day you learn something new. Every day you get to train yourself in a completely new way to approach a story or to talk to different people. You meet lots of different people in this profession. So there's never a boring day, but it can be very overwhelming because you have to be constantly on your feet to keep yourself informed, to keep yourself engaged, to think of how you can communicate, what you want to do with different people. So my advice to people who want to be journalists is don't be a journalist if you're not very curious about the world around you. So very important to be extremely curious about what's happening around you. And if you have that kida in you, like we say, if you have that thing in you of wanting to know things, then it's a great profession. It's very rewarding. But if you're someone who gets tired by too much information, if you like to just shut things and not care too much about the world around you, then don't become a journalist.
And when you are put in power, like when you are covering a very complex story and you are put in face of power, when there are powerful interests defaming you, then how do you go about it?
I'm usually very cool about everything because I have a very good organization that backs me, supports me. So that's very important also for young journalists that, when you want to join a profession where an organization can mentor you. They look at your work, they train you well, they make sure that you are doing journalistically, ethically correct things. And when things go wrong, they should be able to back you up. So I'm very lucky that I work in an organization where I felt a lot of support, that whatever I do, I have people backing me. And of course, it also means that you have great responsibility on yourself. You can't be casual in your words, you can't be casual in your utterances, you have to be very careful about what you're putting out there, you have to check yourself, fact check yourself, you have to be careful in how you present yourself. So there's a lot of responsibility, but once you do everything right, once you follow ethical standards of your organization, then the organization backing you keeps you safe and keeps you feeling that okay, I can take on anyone if I have people backing me.
And when you don't have people backing you,
then that's a problem. Ideally, you should work in an environment and an organization that can stand by your work. That means they should make sure that your work is correct. Like I said, investigations, it goes through multiple layers. We won't just let the reporter put anything out there because we have to protect the reporter also from anything that may happen to them, lawsuits or defamation and all that. So protect your workers, protect your colleagues, protect your reporting, but then also stand by them. Unfortunately, today there are times where people can feel very alone and the organization doesn't stand by them, and I think that's a huge problem.
Yeah, ma'am, that's why I wanted to ask you, if someone wants to pursue it individually, how do they go about it?
I think it's best to start with an organization. I feel like you can become a freelance independent journalist after maybe working for some time to understand how systems work. But when you start in the beginning, I think you should work for a good organization where you feel you learn. Because journalism is not something you can prepare yourself for in a college or in a classroom. You have to be in a newsroom to really understand what journalism is, to understand how to do it. So on-field experience is very important, which I think comes best when you are associated with an organization with good mentors.
And any personal advice that you would like to give us?
Personal advice. I don't want to give very serious advice because I think you all are very young right now. And in college, like I was saying in my keynote also, this is a great time to just learn for the sake of learning. Experience yourself, experience what you love, what you hate, experience what you're good at, challenge yourself, because this time, you're totally free of any issues. You don't have to pay rents, you don't have to take care of kids, you don't have to arrive in office at 10 o'clock. So you're really free in that way. Of course, you have to attend your classes and of course you have to do your assignments. But, it's broadly a time where you can really get to experience who you are. So I would suggest that take interest in what's happening around you. Definitely pick up hobbies, whether it's dramatics, whether it's debating, dancing, like what you guys are doing here, videos, shooting, magazine. Pick up something so that you know that you love something or that you don't like something. Because ultimately, if you want a professional career, it's very important to know yourself. What do you really like? What are you good at? What are you bad at? It's very important to also know what you're terrible at, right? You shouldn't keep doing something that you're bad at because you keep failing at it. So it's best to move on when you're not good at something. So my advice to you would really be use these years in college to really understand yourself and focus on yourself. And of course, make very good friendships, because this is a time where you make some of the best friendships that will last you your life. So be engaged, be involved, make good friends, and get to know yourself better.
Concluding the interview, so any adjective that you would like to give?
A general adjective. My God, that's a very philosophical adjective of the day for me. Wow, I wish I knew you were going to ask me this before. Then I would have really given you something deep and thoughtful.
What
Right
are
now,
your
I'll just say something that will come to my mind, like hungry or something. I think I want to leave you guys with like a hopeful thing. So, dreamer, maybe. Be a dreamer. Dream big, that's a verb. Dream big will become action. But dreamers, I think people tend to look down upon dreamers, that you're just in your thoughts, you're lost. But I think nothing amazing happens in your life if you don't dream big and if you don't believe that you can do something. So be a dreamer.
On behalf of Center for Media Studies, I thank you for gracing us with your
Thank you so
presence.
much.
Thank you for having us. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for being here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for this interview. This is me, Simran Sharma, signing off with video journalists Poona Pragna and Panupriya. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.